so I'm going to try to deliver on it. We might even talk about NFTs if we get there. Has that been dropped yet today? Has anybody talked about NFTs? No? All right. We'll see. So thanks for sticking around. We got a really exciting group of people to speak to you today. We're going to talk about rethinking health and life insurance. We're going to talk about a bunch of different things. We're going to talk about trends. We're going to talk about technology. We're going to talk about how to reach a younger audience and customer base. To be honest, I've got 4 questions and we have 45 minutes. We could certainly fill 45 minutes with these 4 questions, but what I'm really hoping is that we can get a lot of questions from the audience coming in and make this as conversational and engaging as possible. So please, from the very beginning, I've been told that if you put questions in, they will show up on my iPad. Sounds like magic, but we'll see if it works. So yeah, would love to hear from you as we go through it. So as I was introduced, just to give you a little bit of context on kind of how I'm approaching this topic and this conversation. So my background is in the startup world. I worked at a bunch of different startups in the US, mostly in kind of like the Web 2.0 world. I spent a decade in advertising agencies, including 7 with Gary Vaynerchuk, and if you have not heard of him, you should definitely check him out. He's an interesting guy. But it was all around kind of digital marketing and media. How do you build brands? How do you reach customers? How do you deliver business results through modern marketing? I spent the last almost 3 years at 11FS as the chief marketing officer at 11FS. So I see a couple nods. People might have heard of 11FS. Basically, what that company does is they build greenfield digital ventures for traditional financial service organizations, more in banking than insurance, but a little bit in insurance as well. And then as of 6 months ago, I launched Rival. So we're a marketing consultancy. We build challenger brands, challenger go-to-market strategies, and capabilities within existing marketing functions. But that's quite enough about me. Let me turn it over to the panel to introduce themselves. So Somesh, why don't you go first?
Sure. So hi, everyone. I don't know if you can hear me. No? Can you hear me now? Yeah, perfect. Okay, sorry. So my name is Somesh Chandra. I am the Chief Health Officer for AXA in Europe and Latin America. I have another hat which I wear is the head of business head for digital health for the AXA group, which spans across all the geographies we operate in. I have been in this role for 3.5 years. I joined AXA 6 years back as the COO for health globally, and my job was to set up the health business line at that point of time in 2016. It's been a great journey because, of course, we are a large company, but we wanted health to be the pillar of our strategy going forward. So that's something that I worked on quite a bit in the last few years. Before that, I was the acting CEO for Bupa in India, so running the Bupa business. I've also had an experience of opening up a new company in India on health insurance. And before that, I've worked in McKinsey. I was the head of the outsourcing and offshoring practice. And then I've done tech for the 10, 12 years before that in McKinsey. So experience around tech, worked on a lot of health, insurance, and consulting in the meanwhile.
Great. Jim?
Okay, hi, Jim Searle. I'm the Chief Operating Officer at WPA Health Insurance. We're a single line health insurer based over in Taunton in the West Country. I've been at WPA for just over 5 years. I was CIO for a year and then Chief Operating Officer since then. Before that, I worked in defence technology and things like that, and before that, the Army.
Afternoon, everyone. I'm Will Wood. I head up the Life and Health Business Unit for Instanda. Instanda is a software as a service policy administration system and works across P&C and the life and health market. Prior to Instanda, I was at Aviva for 15 years. An eclectic mix of roles, so I won't sit here and go through them all, but ended up in a digital transformation role which spanned pensions over into general insurance and into life and health as well.
Cool. Yeah, I think it's really interesting hearing you guys introduce yourself because not only is there such a breadth of experience, but you've all held roles that required you to kind of think about how to change an existing business. So literally digital transformation or setting up a new business in a new market. And I think that's going to be really an interesting perspective as we talk about some of the questions today. So first question, what are the major trends reshaping the health and life insurance markets? We can go in any direction with that. Why don't we go back in the other direction? If we want to start with you, Will.
Yeah, sure. So I mean, if I think about the experiences that I'm seeing within Instanda at the moment from a technology point of view, I think some of the subjects have been touched on a bit today. So you've got the new influx of wearable devices that are just getting better with the data that can be collected. I think that's certainly a trend, not across all markets. I look across Asia and into Africa and into the US, as well as Europe, and I think they're all at very different stages. Well-being is a big one. I think the big winner, and I think it was in the Swiss Re report recently, is digital GP. Digital GP comes with a lot of products now. It's a really good service. I can testify to that myself. And I think in markets like Germany, it's now mandated as certain health products have got to have digital GP within the proposition. So that will continue to be something that sticks within the market. So I think, wearables, definitely well-being. And then I think the other one is around embedded insurance. I think even in the life and health space, there's certainly some new distribution channels that can be looked at to be able to place the products in the right place for customers at the right time for the right reasons. So they're probably the three I would focus on.
Jim, can you build on that?
I won't repeat, kind of cover that ground, but certainly from the health space, I think it's because we've all spent the last 2 years at home, people are thinking about how do we service our customers kind of far more remotely. So digital GP, but also kind of genetic testing, fingerprick tests, definitely wearables, and I think we're just getting started in that space. I think the amount of information we're going to be able to pull in to support customers in the future to kind of help them make daily decisions about how they live, we're just at the start of that journey. And I think there's basically a tidal wave of demand and awareness about health insurance at the moment, and I think trying to cope with that as a how do we as a supplier kind of meet that demand, keep the customer engaged, but also kind of help them to understand how they can help themselves. And that's where I think we come back to the self-serve, the digital, the genetics as we go into the future, and the wearable technology. And integrating all of that into one place that's easy and intuitive to use is actually pretty difficult.
And I think just building on that word intuitive, and you also mentioned expectations, which is something that we were talking about in the speaker room before we came on stage. Do we want to talk about that real quick? I mean, I know it's not a separate question, but within this conversation around trends, the shifting nature and landscape of consumer expectation, both within the category of health and life insurance and outside the category of health and life insurance, as consumers don't, humans, let's forget the word consumer, human beings, we don't only interact with a product, a service, or a brand within that category. We interact with the world of products, services, and brands, and expectations can get set by other categories as well. Do you want to expand on that a little bit?
So I would say that, and I've sat in most of the talks, and actually a lot of this has been discussed already, that people want to treat their health insurance as they treat their Netflix experience or their Domino's experience. So they want to know, they want to be able to claim on their phone, they want to be able to understand their policy on their phone, they want to be able to access GP on their phone, they want to be able to upload their, at least part of the journey on their phone. So if they want to book a GP appointment, they want to be able to do that on their phone. If they've got to do a pre-authorization, then to go and see a consultant, they want to be able to do that on the phone. They want to find the consultant on their phone. So everything is now really for a certain segment. And again, we've heard a lot today about, knowing your customer. There's an omni-channel experience. Not all of our customers want to do this, but probably 50 to 60% do. So we have to be able to offer up a large part of that experience, whether it's the initial consultation, the diagnostics, et cetera, or understanding where you are in the claims process. And I don't want to describe them as hurdles, but what things you need to overcome to get to where you as a consumer want to be. We need to be able to kind of offer that up for those customers that want it on a phone or a tablet, and make it easy to understand and pleasurable and not stressful. Try and take the stress out of it. A health insurance claim is probably one of the most stressful things you'll do for obvious reasons, and we need to actually help that journey become stressless, not put stress in the way.
Yeah, and I think we got a question coming up later on about personalization, so I'm sure that we'll talk more about that. Somesh, how about from you, major trends reshaping the landscape?
I'll talk about health insurance, but health in general. If I just zoom out for a minute and think about where are the needs, because that is where the trends should come from ideally. So if you think about the needs today, there's been the innovation in the health space has been quite significant in the last 2-3 years, but actually it has started long before that as well. So I think we are building on that. There are 3 things that I think people are facing today which you have to solve for. The first one is the cost of care. I think that's becoming a reality. Insurance and even healthcare is becoming more and more expensive. GDP growth is at 1 to 2%. Inflation is at 8-9% in terms of medical inflation. We will hit a wall. So let's be real, we have to find a way to do things better, reduce the cost of care. The second one is more around this whole ecosystem is very complex. And as you were saying earlier, people are used to shopping on Amazon and watching Netflix. Health, which is something so critical for our lives, why can't that be something similar, right? So I think it's more about just the complexity will be there because health is not an easy subject, but for the consumer, it needs to be simple. And we'll talk more about it. And the third one is around the quality of care, which is, we've talked about healthcare more as a fee for service, but actually we need to move towards outcomes. And there's a lot of talk that's happened about it, but we haven't done much about it. So if somebody goes to see a doctor and they don't feel well, if they don't recover in 5 days, they still go to a doctor again and they have to pay the fees again. So I think I'm not saying it's hospital or insurance or whatever it is, it's actually that whole problem that needs to be sorted out. So I think if you think about the trends, all the trends that we're looking at, and we'll talk about it in the next few minutes, are around cost of care, quality of care and accessibility, and simplifying this whole complicated healthcare ecosystem.
Yeah, it's really about getting to the job that the customer needs done in their life as opposed to the product that you sell. So moving on, and please continue to send questions in. We'll start to weave them into the conversation as we go. So second question from us, what are the possible positive and negative side effects of rapid digitalization in life and health? And I will throw that up as a jump ball for whoever wants to jump in first.
Yeah, I think one of the things that comes to mind, which is critical, and someone's just mentioned it, is definitely around the claims experience. So I think everyone wants to get digitization right, but if you push too hard and take out some of the pieces of the value chain for the customer, which are really important and at an emotive time, that could be a consequence of this. So making sure that claim journey has still got a person at the end of the phone to be able to speak to at a time when they're going to embark on this new process that they've never been through before, I think will continue to be really important. So making sure that we digitize the right parts is just as important as thinking about when an actual person is needed as well.
Maybe I'll just go next. I think building on what Will just mentioned. So I think we sometimes go from completely physical to completely digital. And at least in healthcare, it cannot be either of them. It can't be completely physical because we don't have those many doctors and we'll never have a situation where supply will become more than demand. And on the other side, if everything is digital and we don't get that touch and feel, it's a problem. At least we have been offering teleconsultation services for a long time now. I think more than 10 years, in some countries even more than that, for example in the UK. And the question is, teleconsultation is great, but it's never helped us reduce claims cost and things like that. And the reason for that is that when people are digitally interacting with you, they don't feel the same comfort that they would feel going to a doctor. So people who have gone for teleconsultation, maybe in the evening might end up going to a doctor because they feel they're not recovering, but you can't recover in 2-3 hours. So it's a lot of change that needs to happen. So in my mind, we have to think about a phygital world, which is a combination of digital and physical. And the question is, how can we digitize things which can solve the problem? And where we need to be physical, we seamlessly migrate from that digital experience to a physical experience. So if, for example, we've done symptom checkers and things like that, and the output of the symptom checker tells us to go to a doctor, I don't have to go to a doctor and explain everything again. It should be just seamlessly flowing through that journey. So that's what we're used to in our day-to-day lives. And I think for us, at least in the healthcare space, that phygital experience is going to be very critical, and smooth transition to customers to physical and digital and vice versa.
And just to draw a line under one of the things you said, it needs to solve the problem. I think oftentimes digital or any new technology, oftentimes we can go looking for a problem for it to solve, as opposed to have a problem and then use it to actually solve that problem. And that's what's going to lead you in the right direction.
Absolutely, yes.
Jim, what about from you?
I think they've talked about the sexy stuff, so I'm going to talk about the boring stuff. I think digitalization can take out some of the costs. So instead of having people looking up medical records, a computer can do that faster. It can look at the claims experience and tell you when you're trying to manage the business a bit more about what you're seeing so you can make better decisions which can reduce the cost. Why is that important? As Somesh said, with medical inflation running at 8, 9, 10, probably 11%, we need to drive down those costs so that we can still offer our customers good value. And as we kind of head into a cost of living crisis, that's what people want to see. I think, so that's an advantage. Another advantage is that, and again, it's largely been covered, but through kind of digital services, you can sometimes help people make better decisions about the care that that they're seeking. So there's no point in sending somebody that's showing symptoms of back pain to a GP if the kind of AI diagnostics tool says just go straight to a physio, and that's cheaper for us, it's cheaper for them. Again, it drives down the cost. I think the dangers are that we leave some customers behind. So we definitely saw during the pandemic, so we wrote to all of our customers, well, digitally, and said, you can't send us mail at the moment because there's nobody in the office. And there were 10, 20% of our customers that were deeply uncomfortable with that, and for good reasons. And I think there is that segment of customers still that don't want to go on an app, they don't want to upload receipts via a smartphone, they don't want to do that. And we still have to cater for them. Number one, because the FCA and the PRA say we have to, but also they're good customers, and we need to care about them too.
So on that, why don't I there's a couple questions coming in from the audience. So first one that I have is, how can insurers get UK customers interested in buying health or life insurance? There's all these trends, all these things going on, all these potential positive and negative side effects. As an insurer, how do you actually think about reaching and starting to change perception and behavior within a UK consumer base?
I think rewards certainly come into that. So I think if you can bring an element of reward to create engagement and nudge people, and that can be prior to the takeout of the product, it can be within as well. I think if you can bring that sort of engagement in, and it's a continual problem within insurance, right? I mean, life insurance is probably the worst example of engagement, because you usually take the product out and you hear nothing until they want more money off you, or you've got to go through a renewal cycle. So creating the engagement and doing it in a meaningful way at the right point is key. When that is and how that happens, $1 million question.
So there's another question that I'm actually very interested in hearing your answers on. On the topic of wearables, which we were discussing in the trends segment, do you ever envision a time when they are required for health or life insurance coverage?
I don't envisage a time when, not in the medium term, when they'll be required. I think people will. There was a big conversation about telematics earlier on in cars, and obviously nudging people to drive more safely helps everybody. And I think where wearables are going, so if we can understand your heart rate, your blood oxygen level, probably glucose levels, movement, so your physical activity, sleep, we can understand a lot about you, and we can help you understand about you, which is the most important thing. And that's going to have an impact on premiums and on customer selection and all sorts of stuff. Not because we're going to say, right, we're going to put everybody in a big database and rate everybody, but simply because the people that will uptake those kind of policies, where you have to have some kind of behavioural change, will get a better deal, and they will self-select into those policies. So, and it kind of touches on the engagement with different market segments and how do we get people interested. I think there was a time when health and life kind of fitted in certain stages in people's kind of, right, okay, you get health insurance probably when you get to a certain stage of management with a company. You get life insurance when your mortgage starts to get scary and you've got children and you think, oh my God, what's going to happen to them if I die? Now I think there's just a spectrum, and I think everybody's starting to think much earlier about their health. The gamification of these kind of things, the rewards, all of that kind of stuff is building so that people are much more aware of their kind of health status and health experience from younger to much older, and they think about managing it more because we're told to, and it's like subliminal messaging all the time about what we eat, how we look, and that kind of stuff. So I think people are naturally starting to engage with that. It's kind of our challenge to help people understand that just as you kind of make a deal with Google Maps, that they're going to know a hell of a lot about you, but you're never going to get lost again. And most people are happy to give up that privacy for the help of never being lost or being able to find sushi whenever they want it. And we're going to have to kind of persuade people that allowing us to help them know about themselves in probably an anonymised, safe way, but that's going to be good for them and it's going to be good for us. And I think we're only just getting started with wearables, and they won't be wearable for long. They'll be under the skin.
If I just go back to the previous question, if that's okay for you,
Sure.
just build on Will. I think, though I have a role which is Europe and LATAM, I live in the UK, so I'm quite passionate about increasing insurance penetration here because it will be good for everyone. So I think if I just go back to that question, which I think is a very important one, because NHS is great and we all kind of love the services we get, but also there is a lot of pressure on the system. So the question is, if we improve insurance penetration here, it will help a lot in general. The reason why, and in spite of that, we have only 10 to 15% penetration in insurance. So there is certainly a problem we need to solve. And I think there are two things that needs to be looked at in that. The number one is the nature of the products. Right? Today we have a completely comprehensive product which is quite expensive, but we'll have to think about products which are simple, affordable, which can cater to the 90% in addition to the 10% of the market. So I think there's a lot of product innovation that can be done in the UK to be able to increase that penetration. And to be honest, I think compared to, because I do see all the different markets, UK is one of the most open markets in terms of adoption of digital, in terms of being very reasonable of what is possible with data. So I think we have a long way to go in terms of creating products which are more, I would say, accepted across the population. The second thing is about services. So I think the magic will happen when you combine insurance with the right services, because a young person is not thinking 20 years from now and saying, oh, if I get a heart attack, what will I do? That's not how we think as humans. We think about now and maybe 2, 3, 4, 5 years. The question is, what do you have to offer to different segments of people at that point of time? So if you're covering maternity cover for somebody who is 15, 20 years old versus somebody who is 70, 80 years old, they don't need that cover. So the question is, how do we cater to people in that segment for them to feel excited about saying, I have insurance and I know it takes care of me. To your earlier point, how does it really solve a need rather than a standard product that's given to everyone to use? So I think those are the two things in my mind which can help.
I think the other thing I would throw in, and I would because this is the world that I know, but even just from personal experience trying to buy life insurance in the UK, which by the way is incredibly complicated as an American taxpayer, but separate conversation, the role of brand. Yeah. I think of kind of the major insurance companies, and no offense, it's tough for me as a consumer to understand what they stand for that's different. The product, the price, sure, but the brand, not as much. And then you look at the challengers coming into the space, the dead happies of the world, and they just stand out in a completely different way. So I would also, add my 2 cents of how can insurers get UK consumers interested in buying health and life insurance. Part of it is brand, trying to differentiate. So to Jim's point about embeddable wearables, let's move on to the next question. How are new technologies, I think we can talk about new technologies in general, but also specifically RPA, AI, advanced analytics, how are they addressing business challenges? Let's take that one.
Yeah, I think there's a combination of different services out there. So you've got services that can plug in now and allow you to take information very quickly into a quote and an application form. So simple robotics. You've then got underwriting tools which allow you to underwrite customers a lot quicker and make the experience a lot more seamless for customers as well. And then I think the whole kind of data piece that's all wedded within that which is probably the bigger question around how do you get all of that interconnectivity and working together to make sure that customer experience can be really brought to life and it can be really seamless for a customer. But it also, to Jim's point, it then brings the operational efficiencies and benefits with it as well. So I think there are already tools out there that can be used and different technologies. I think one of the things the industry's only really starting to get its head round and try to understand is how do you get them all connected together? I work with customers at the moment where you are taking different data points from different tools and technologies, and they can be sat on different technologies, and therefore it's different ways of getting the integrations to work. So I'd hope that in the next few years all of that starts to collect together and you see the emergence of the tools that are doing really well, and they've got the real slickness and the proper data set behind them. So I think it's out there. I think there's plenty of technology to be looked at. We will all be well aware of the well-known companies, but there are certainly new InsurTech companies that are coming out and really disrupting the market.
So yeah, so I'm not a tech guy, but love to have an opinion on something I don't know very well. But I'll try and bring a business angle to it. So if you think about, so there is no doubt that digital and tech have a big role to play. If we don't accept that now, I think we'll never will. But it's going to be a big thing. But three things in my mind which will really help accelerate that journey. The number one is the whole health systems, the data exchange and everything else that we do is not simple. So if you go and tell a hospital, I want data from you, they'll say, this is not my job, I can treat patients, that's not what I will do. So we have to have a way to collect data and information, of course, in a compliant way, which is simple to take in and make sense out of it. The second thing is, I was saying earlier, how do you connect these different things together? Services, insurance, claims, everything else, this needs to be connected. But unless you have standardized data, you can't do much about it. And the last point is, once you have standardized data, once the services are all interconnected with insurance, then the last step is, how do you personalize the journey? How do you make that seamless? So I think there's a big role of digital ecosystems to play. And that is where AI can play a big role, because then we know what kind of movies we like to watch, and Amazon Prime or Netflix tells us that. But we, based on all the data we have, if we can't predict that we are becoming diabetic or we might have a heart condition, well, we can watch Netflix for a long time, but we need to live for that. So I think it's very important that we start to bring things in perspective and use AI and data for, of course, claims processing and others, but also to predict what's going to happen to us to live a better life.
Jim, do you have anything you want to add to that question? Because otherwise Somesh has teed up the next one very well.
No, Somesh covered that perfectly, and I would just echo what he said.
So, jumping off of what you said, you mentioned personalization. It's almost as if you knew what the next question was. How should personalization versus flexibility versus reinventing skill sets be prioritized in the context of rethinking health and life insurance? Maybe we'll just let you keep rolling.
Well, so I'll be short. So I think, because I've said a lot already in the previous point, but in my view, the way we have to think about personalization is, as you were saying in the beginning, it needs to solve a specific problem.
Yeah.
Right? It can't be that there's a product and I want you to buy. I think those times are gone, right? There needs to be a product that is meeting a need, and that's why it needs to be done. So if we put that in the same perspective, I would say that the whole personalization bit is, we cannot be operating in our own silos. As an insurance company, and a large one in the UK and many other countries, we have to think about partnerships, because consumers' lives revolve around everything which is around them: hospitals, insurance companies, GPs, and everything else. So I think there is the whole bit around partnerships, speaking to different stakeholders, and I don't think any of us can solve this problem on our own. So I think there's a big partnership angle that we need to look at. The second thing is about helping customers take decisions that they cannot. So for example, walk 10,000 steps. Yeah, of course, I know I need to walk 10,000 steps, but what do I do? So for example, if I'm sitting in a meeting for the whole day and I've only walked 2,000 steps and my house is 8,000 steps away, can you tell me that I should walk rather than taking the underground home? So it needs to be a bit more, I know it's not that cool, but I'm saying it needs to be a bit more practical for me to do something about it. And in my mind, that is real personalization. The personalization is not about wearing some fancy stuff in your hand and Google glasses. It's great, I'm not against that, but I'm saying that's a good addition to life. What is personalization is what helps you live a better life on a day-to-day basis. So I think that's where I would bring in a lot of things which are very connected to our day-to-day lives, but that can only happen when you are connected to the consumer's life in general, and not only in that small silo that we live in.
Who wants to jump in?
I think you have to allow people to personalise in the way they want to personalise. Somesh might want to be told to walk home. I do not want to be told by my insurer what to do. What I want to be able to do is to be able to access the care that I want at the time I want, understand who I'm going to see, understand whether they've got a good record, whether there's parking at the hospital, all of these kind of things. And I want that journey to be personalised to me. So I think we're following a trend that is, we want everything served up to us in exactly the way we want it. And I just think we have to buy a ticket and get on that bus. That unfortunately does actually mean quite a lot of expense for the insurer, because we need to be able to accept a WhatsApp, we need to be able to accept a Facebook message, we need to be able to accept a text, an email, a letter, and those don't come for free. It also means that we have to be able to kind of maintain a consultant database, understand where the consultant works many of them work at different hospitals, understand what day they're at different hospitals, and again, that comes at cost to be able to personalise that journey. We're not there yet. I don't think any health insurer in the UK is there yet. But the future I would like to envisage that is, if you do want to go and see somebody, we can help you choose whether you want to see somebody close to where you live, on your journey to work, close to your work, at a time that suits you, whether that's a lunch break, and kind of make the journey as friction-free for you and as pleasurable for you. Not pleasurable, but we want to take the stress out of it for you. So I think that's one way of doing it, that I think we have to accept that we're going to be forced down that road, because that's what our customers expect. Because if everything else works like that, if ordering a pizza is like that, if booking a holiday is like that, booking a hotel, we just have to follow that journey, which is very difficult because of the way that the health architecture of the UK, as you point out, works. And it's not, there's the big Leviathan NHS, and then lots of fragmentation around that, whether it's consultants that work in the NHS or physios or dentists. It is a bit of a nightmare, but it is starting to be tied up, slowly but surely.
And I don't disagree with anything Jim said. I think personalisation needs to be driven by the customer and what they want. I don't think we're there by a long way of being able to personalise a lot of things. I think the only thing that I'd probably touch on as an addition is just around the additional services that are now available as well. So being able to offer up at the right time, and also making sure it's working. I think there's a long way to go before things are actually working anyway, before you get to personalisation. So if you're giving customers the tools to be able to help because they're suffering from depression, or they need to get to a physio because they're starting to get a backache, to try and prevent them coming and using the actual product itself. I think there's more to be done to be able to engage in that space before you even get to the product and start thinking about true personalisation.
That is a good point that I would just jump on the back of, is corporates, because about half of our customers don't buy as an individual policy or a family policy. They're given from their employer, and what employers tend to want is very, very different from an individual customer. And that's when you get we want people to stand up every hour, so your app needs to vibrate. We want all of these we want a mental health service, we want GP Online, we want you to pick up the phone within 45 seconds so we have to kind of be able to cater to the individual customer, but I think they're just about in the minority in our business, and that the corporate customers are demanding, but in a different way, and they want corporate personalisation rather than individual personalisation, which is just another challenge, really.
But it's the same challenge and same opportunity, because if I can draw a red thread through what you all have said as an answer to this question, there's a huge opportunity in personalization, but it needs to be solving a problem in a way that creates ideally differentiated value for your customer, which comes from understanding what their needs are, whether that's an individual or a company. So it all kind of starts there and then works backwards. How can you use digital? How can you use the technology, the talents, the opportunities available to you to solve those problems and add more value through personalization? And also, Jim doesn't like to walk home. That's the other takeaway. All right.
Well, I work 70 miles from where I live, so it would be a long walk.
So let's move on. So talking about a more disengaged, younger customer, certainly relevant to this conversation around expectations. How can insurers tap into this segment?
I'll jump in. So I took my godson out for dinner when I came down to London the other day, and he plays football a lot here in London. And I said to him, right, how could I get you as a 25-year-old to buy insurance? And he just went, I won't. But as the conversation kind of threaded out, he gets concerned about, if I break my shin playing football, if this happens, that happens. And so there are definite threads, and I think we need to be in listening mode to understand what the requirements of that 25 to 30-year-old population is, because they're definitely underinsured. We know that mental health is a big thing for all age groups, but especially that age group. We know accessing primary care is patchy and getting more difficult. And I think that kind of group do have needs that we can cover. Now, obviously, they are digital first. They're the proper digital natives, so we have to worry less about printing letters off and sending to them and that kind of stuff. But cost is they're really cost conscious, and they're very, very conscious about things actually being tailored to them, as we've just discussed. So they're not going to do what we say. They want us to do what they want. So they want everything on their terms. They don't want to spend much on it, and they want it to be easy and intuitive and digital first. There are some kind of InsurTechs that are kind of foraying into that market. It's not our market, but we're obviously very interested. So I think it's that differentiator. So it's how do you seemingly create value day to day in their lives? Because although not as remote as life insurance, you don't really want to engage with your health insurer. It's not a fun experience. It means something's gone wrong. So, but should we be relevant in their lives every day? I'm not sure about what I think about that, but I think there is an opportunity to be so. So the chap from Vitality was here earlier. They've done a really good job. It's difficult for me to say that in terms of making themselves relevant with the free watches and the cinema tickets and all that kind of stuff. They definitely appeal to a younger audience. I think that audience wants to feel relevant. It wants to feel as though there's lots of touch points, so it needs to be exciting. So I think the things around the gamification, so it's knowing about, how many steps have I done, how much phys have I done, exercise have I done, is my blood pressure where it should be, is my heart rate where it should be, all of that kind of stuff. They kind of seem to like that as a touch point. They like the mental health stuff, they like the GP online, physio, all of this kind of stuff. But we need to make it more relevant to them day to day to extract that value, and it needs to be really cost effective because, as I said, we understand that prices are going up for everything, and you're asking people to sacrifice one thing to pay 20 quid a month for health insurance, which can seem a lot when you're 25.
Maybe just to build on Jim, I completely agree with the points. I think there are three simple things that we have to think about the younger generation. The first one is what they love, what they want, and what they don't want. And I'll just talk a little bit about that. So I think what they would love is, today's generation is very health conscious. They love to go to the gym. They like to have good food, healthy food. I think there is that piece which is about the wearables and rewards and everything else that will work for them. The second part is something that they will need, right? So for example, if they're not feeling well, or if they've pulled a muscle, they need things like teleconsultation, which is simple, easy, cost effective, and mostly convenient. Rather than going to a GP and waiting for a couple of hours, they would like to do that. And the third part, which I think Jim mentioned as well, is about mental health. If you talk about mental health, I don't think and having two boys at home, they will never talk about that saying, oh, this is perfectly fine, it's easy. But actually, we know that in the survey, Mind Health survey that we did across the globe, there are 3 times the general, I would say the adults from 21 to 35 were 3 times more vulnerable than people about that, because they've never seen something like this before. There is pressure of college or work or whatever it is, and they're not used to it. So I think we have to be very careful about that, because as an insurer, I can tell you that none of us have experienced what a mental health issue could cause in terms of claims costs in the next 20 years. There is no model that exists today. So we are working on it. We know that it's very difficult to justify the ROI to say, why am I investing in this with this generation? But we know that mental health is never so obvious like a knee pain or a back pain. It starts with different symptoms and then goes really quite a bit. But by the time you realize it's become a problem, it's already too late. So the question is, how do we solve this, which is something that we've never experienced before?
And I think just to build upon what Jim was talking about, it's definitely to do with segmenting the market in the right way. I mean, if using another example, the e-gamer market's in the hundreds of millions. The average age of the top professional gamers are 16 to 24 years old. They're earning income. They've probably never thought about income protection, and they're sat there all day in chairs and need to make sure they're doing exercise, so they're not going to suffer from the ailments that Somesh has just talked about. So I do think you've got to really drill down into that segment if you're going to make something relevant, because it's a tough one to crack in the health and the life space.
So we got another question from the audience, and I'm conscious we only got a few minutes left, but I think this is a good one. So personalization is great, but doesn't it create an underclass of people that are seen as uninsurable?
I think that's a huge challenge, and it's one we're thinking about. I think there is that underinsured caucus that exists already, if you see what I mean. So if you look at the corporate market, about, you've got the top 10% having really good health insurance, you've got the next 20% having pretty good health insurance, and then often 70% having nothing. And one of the challenges is how do we deliver something low cost into that space that's easily accessible, but that delivers actual value and benefit to people. And I think there are ways to do that. I don't think the reality is there will always be people where the risk is just not economic to insure them, and that's why the NHS is there, right? To kind of, so that we all pay our taxes and we all kind of put into that bucket, and it's not going to go anywhere. But I think there is definitely an underinsured group of people. They're probably the majority that I think we can do a lot for in terms of clever product design and offering what they need at the life stage that they are.
So I think the concept of insurance is that you need to mix different kind of risks together. Otherwise, it's not insurance, right? So I don't want to tell you that. You all know that very well. So if you start to mix the same kind of pool together, then it's more like a service than insurance. So I think what we have to really think about, and as Jim was mentioning, is create smart products, right? And for example, and Vitality has done a good job in South Africa creating diabetes products and things like that. It takes a lot of hard work, both internally and externally, to do that. But I think however well you underwrite today I have no problems, I'm fine. 20 years down the line, I will have problems, and how do you deal with it? So as an insurance company, we have to build those capabilities anyway, because that problem is not going to get solved on its own. So I think we have to think a little bit more holistically. I don't think we are there as yet as an insurance industry. There have been some good examples, but we have to think about this in the future of how we create those specialized products and able to manage that over a longer period of time. Because if you look at it from a 20, 30-year point of view, you have to build that capability anyway.
I think just the other thing quickly on that as well is, especially if I think about the MGA market within the UK, they're actually quite good at coming up with those types of simpler products for impaired lives. And I think it's maybe that it's the working of the insurers with the MGAs to make sure that sort of market can be served. So I think there are products out there that can help with that. Personalization might actually, if you flip it on its head, help with those customers as well, because you can then get a really specialized product for them. So I think there can be good that comes out of personalization too.
So I'm thinking that we can close it. I'd love to hear from each of you. We've covered a lot of ground. There's a lot that we didn't even get a chance to talk about, but if there's one thing that you want to leave people here with as a takeaway, something to think about, something to do differently from everything that you've said, that we've discussed, what would it be? And I'll give you a second to collect your thoughts, because that was not on the sheet, and I'll share mine, which is what I said before. I think the thing that I'm going to walk out of here, one, I learned a lot, so thank you. And two, I think this concept of how do you create more value? It's really a lot of what we've been saying in different ways to answer these different questions, but it seems like a lot of roads lead back to that. If you understand what the customer needs are to the best of your ability, financially, commercially, from a regulatory perspective, if you can solve that, then there's more opportunity for you. So I think that's my big takeaway, but why don't we go back this way? Will, do you want to share yours?
Yeah, I think for me it's, and from what I see in the industry and from the tech side is, we just need to start getting it right from the interlinking of the services that are wrapped around the product, as well as then delivering from a claims side as well. So I'd like to think we're moving in that direction. We're definitely not there, but I can see it starting to come together. So seeing more of that in the future, and I think it's backed up by some of the comments that Somesh and Jim have made today as well.
I think overall in 5 years, we're kind of halfway through the revolution. I think the journeys will be smoother. I think access to what you need when you need it will be better. And I think we will have come up with a partnership between us and the customer about how that data benefits us both.
And I think for me, it's the next 5 years will be very different than the last 5 years. Hope so. I'm sure we will. But I think the question here is, one, we have, with all that's happened in the last 3-4 years, digitization is going to be very important. We don't have to go back to the old world, but at the same time, we need to make sure we can build on what we have already. So that's number one, is digital, physical together. And the second thing is, at least in the healthcare industry, we are in a very special position where we don't have to cannibalize and fight with each other. We have to build partnerships. We have to build those ecosystems together. And I think that's going to be very key for us to keep in mind that we can always partner in spite of being competitors. And there are some markets which I work with. We have seen great examples. Germany, all the private insurers have a similar claims management solution. It's great because it reduces the cost. Everybody shares it. They have huge volumes. So I think there's a lot to learn from other countries as well. And I think there is a big scope for partnerships for us.
Great. With that, we will leave you. Will, Jim, Somesh, thank you so much.
Thank you.